revelations that I believe the Lord had given me is that because our daughters are out of position spiritually, our sons are hindered in reaching their goals and in reaching their destiny because everyone is out of position. We're to be a team. We're supposed to fight this battle together, but if positionally our women are out of whack.
So you're not speaking of just positioning ourselves in the physical arena, but spiritually arena.
Absolutely.
Address that a little bit. What is the spiritual position of the woman?
There are many beliefs and many interpretations of what our position is, but I do believe that women have their place in terms of supporting their husbands, and I also believe concurrently that the husband is to support the wife and the vision that God has put in her as well. And the power of agreement is so key in a relationship between a husband and a wife. And if the enemy can destroy that power of agreement, be it through her behavior or his behavior, then he's blown us out of the water. We cannot be effective. How can two walk together unless they be in agreement?
So it's almost like you're saying the woman's position is that of the glue, you know, that the real fabric that holds together
absolutely.
Not only the family but society.
Absolutely, absolutely. And our words carry such weight. Our hearts for seeing that man reach his destiny and his making sure that we reach our destiny. Our hearts and our words are so important and so critical. And if our hearts are damaged and wounded, it comes through in our words. Then our words become wounding and damaging. So the enemy has attacked us on so many fronts, and because we've been so inoculated by the world, we don't see it. And God is saying, wake up out of your slumber.
So you're sounding the alarm because as the woman assumes her position,
correct,
it affects the children.
Yes.
It affects the husband. It affects us. And Lord knows in the church without the women, where would we be?
Where would we be? You know? Exactly.
So give us a synopsis of what you are saying in these meetings.
In this first, and this was our very first Titus 2 talk that we had in this city, God focused us on 3 areas. My first speaker addressed holiness and what that looks like and what we are to do as women to be pleasing to God in our worship life, in our prayer life. We have to pray, and that seems to be a lost dynamic in the church. People have stopped praying, and she addressed those issues. The second night, my speaker spoke on the love of the mother for her children. There is such a disconnect and almost a hatred now between mothers and daughters and fathers and sons. So she really taught about loving our children and how to properly nurture them and how to properly chastise them. And she shared some of the stories from her childhood. And I looked at the faces of some of the young women in the audience, and they were on the edge of their seat because it was like they were hearing new information. Wow. They were hearing about boundaries and limitations because many of them have no boundaries, no limitations. They can stay out until 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning because their mamas are out at 2 and 3 in the morning. Wow. They can dress seductively because their mothers allow them to dress, because their mamas are dressing seductively. And then they bring this dynamic into the church, and the church sits by and say, oh, that's okay, baby. We're going to pray for you, instead of lovingly perhaps taking her aside and saying, sweetheart, there's a better way.
So God birthed this into your spirit because women are out of position.
That's a lot of why I believe I'm here now. It's because we have lost connection with one another as women. And the third night I spoke about that very thing. I called it divine connections. I taught them about how to recognize when God has put a divine connection of another woman into your life, who can speak into your life, someone that will tell you the truth in love, someone who will correct you, someone that will encourage you. And I taught them what to look for in that connection and how to recognize when someone is not from the Lord, when they are trying to disconnect you from the things of God. That was a powerful teaching.
What are some of the experiences that of women that you have identified as a result of being out of position?
Of being out of position?
Yes, because someone is watching the program, and they're saying, you know, you're just not talking about Titus 2, but you're talking about my life and some of the symptoms and of being out of position. What are those that you have found?
Do you want to know one that I hear a lot of in my conversations with
Sure.
women privately? And I'm probably going to lose some friends, but it's okay. It's a real hot button area. But because women have been pulled away from the things of God or have not been introduced to the true and living God and what He says, they have bought into the lie that I don't need a man in my life. And so they have become open to ungodly liaisons with other women. Our young girls have been seduced into that worldly thinking that it's okay. I'm who I am. I can be who I want to be. And then that erroneous teaching is embraced by the church. And now the church is saying, well, it's okay. We're not going to touch that because we're all God's children. Well, yes, God loves us, but He is not embracing our sin. And people have become very hesitant to tell the truth. And so many women are now out of position relationally. They are in intimate relationships with other women.
Women being out of position, as well as men,
Yes.
being out of position leads you to unnatural behavior.
Exactly. And so then the family is, again, eroded because now it's the modern family, if you will. It's no longer mom and dad and the children. Now it's mom and mom, or dad and dad.
Is that like an indication that there's hordes and hordes of people who have given up on God's way?
I believe we are in danger of losing a generation who don't even understand the concept of the traditional marriage anymore or godly relationships because we have not spoken up in the body of Christ. And women have become almost, I don't even have a word to describe it. The only word I can describe it is that we have just went to sleep. And God says, wake up before it's too late, before you lose another generation of young girls who have no idea what the true and living God really wants from His children,
Wow. You're listening in to a conversation with the human alarm clock, Pastor Patricia Qualls of Allen, Texas. Call a friend, call a young lady, just call a woman and tune in to Titus 2 Talk. It is something that will bless your heart and change your community. Pastor Pat, you mentioned that in your first meeting that there was an overflow of people. Are you finding that young women especially are receptive to this message?
They are very, very receptive. One of the things that was critical for this meeting is that these women, young and old, be introduced to pure praise and pure worship. I didn't want entertainment of any kind. I didn't want, and I believe this was the heart of God, He did not want flesh to be on display. This was not about anybody's personal agenda or about any self-promotion. It was important that the worship songs and the praise songs ushered in the presence of God, because we know that in the presence of God there is fullness of joy. And we wanted there to be a renewal of joy and a renewal of peace with these young ladies, because they have had so much dis-ease in their life. And so there had to be an atmosphere of true and pure worship. And it was exactly that. And so we had young girls at the altar, 13 and 14, weeping before the Lord on their face before the Lord. And it was just a sovereign move of God among these women. And the other thing that the Lord spoke in my life is he said, I want you to have women that are older than you to speak to these women. So I had 3 women that were in their 70s and early 80s. Wow. Each night, one of them would address something that had happened in their life and they wanted to share. And I called it What I Know for Sure. Now, I borrowed that from Oprah Winfrey.
What I Know for Sure.
What I Know for Sure.
That was the title.
That was the title, What I Know for Sure. So each night I had a woman, an aged woman in their 70s and early 80s.
Sharing out of their
what
experiences.
I Know for Sure, yes.
Wow.
And it was powerful.
That's powerful.
It was like new information for these women. And these are the women that spoke into my life. These were the ones that were older than me. So I wanted it to be across the board, age-wise, and it was amazing, amazing.
Mm. Well, what were some of the testimonies? What are some of the things you're hearing as a result of this first session from not only the presenters, but those who were receiving this teaching?
I can tell you there were many women that came to my teachers and myself afterwards, and the thing that impacted them the most was that I didn't know that that happened to you. How did you live through that? They could not believe that we had walked through some of the things that we had walked through and still serve God. So I believe the thing that impacted them the most was that they got hope. They received hope from this meeting, that I can make it. If they can make it, if they live to tell the story, if they are still praising God, then there's hope for me. Then there's hope for me.
I'm wondering, just listening to you talk about this and women sharing and pouring into your life, old and new, as you look back over your life and you are quite an exceptional woman for the age that you mentioned, is there something that you wish you knew looking back as a little girl, as a young woman that you are teaching now? Mm-hmm. What is it that you wish these young women knew? As you base this on those powerful 15 verses in Titus 2, looking back over your experience, what is it that is paramount that they would know?
What do I know now that I wish
you knew then?
That I wish I knew then.
That's always a loaded question.
Yes, it is, Pastor. You got to set me up for that one. I wish I had listened. I wish I had listened to the advice that I was given as a young woman. And we've all made those mistakes where we've been given great advice, the benefit of the wisdom of our parents or an older generation, and we just bypass that. The difference between then and now is they have to listen now. They must listen. The times are so different.
Yes.
The times are so critical now. The things that I went through as a 20-year-old are pale in comparison to what a 20-year-old is going through now. So it's imperative that we be effective in how we minister to our children, so that they'll listen, so that they'll hear the message. So I think the packaging has to be a little different today because of the times that we're faced with, but we have got to get this message to them. So I wish I had been a better listener.
Because the margin of error is so much slimmer today than it was
slim.
in your